Hello guys, what's up? Welcome back to a Coder's Journey. This is the first episode of a playlist I have decided to create to talk about guard clauses in ASP.NET Core. So what we are going to do is to go through the text that I have, prepared for this training, and then we will try, the code snippets in Visual Studio. Right now I am using Visual Studio 2022. I haven't prepared any solution files or any projects prior to recording this video, so it's going to be like a real experience. And of course I expect to encounter issues, bugs, problems, which is a part of learning how to write code. And whenever I encounter those problems, I am going to either go to the web, search for a solution, or ask ChatGPT to see if it can help me resolve the issue. So for this playlist, I have decided to create a document, as you can see here, a text-based document, which is about the idea of guard clauses in ASP.NET Core. We are going to also make use of a library called Ardalis Guard Clauses, developed by Steve Smith. And we are going to, install this NuGet package, this library, and try the code snippets that I have prepared in this document. And of course, I have created a repository on my GitHub account, and I am going to, push the changes that we make to the, project, to the solution file in Visual Studio to that GitHub repository. At the end of each video, I am going to make a commit. And of course, in that GitHub repository, you can go to the history of the repository to see the commits. And I think this can help you to see the progress that we are making in this, playlist. And you can, of course, make changes to that repository. You can clone it, you can work with it. And I think that can help you to learn the things we are about to cover in a more structured and meaningful way. So let's get started. Guard clauses in ASP.NET Core. I think if I come here, I can make this full screen, and let's read a little bit about guard clauses to see what they are, intending to do for us. This section introduces the concept of guard clauses and demonstrates their use in ASP.NET Core development, leveraging, as I said, Ardalis.guard clauses library. This is a text that I have prepared using a little bit of, AI. I have made some changes to the text that AI has produced for me, and I'm not sure whether it is 100%, perfect or not. But no worries if there are any, issues here. I think we can, see them as real challenges to investigate a little bit more to better understand the concept of guard clauses. So yeah, I'm not sure whether the code snippets in this document file are perfect, but because I have created this using AI, but the code that we are going to write in Visual Studio and the code that we are going to commit to the repository at the end of each video is going to be absolutely flawless. So what are guard clauses? A guard clause is a software pattern that simplifies complex functions by failing fast. So failing fast is a concept. It means that, for example, in a method, if you have some preconditions to check, if those preconditions are not present, you can, immediately exit the method without writing without executing the lines of code in the method body. So this is the idea of failing fast. It helps with writing cleaner code, and it makes your method, your functions more understandable. So the idea of failing fast therefore means that in the body of a method, if the preconditions that you have do not meet, you can exit that function, that method immediately. You can fail fast without executing any number of lines of code. Checking for invalid inputs upfront and immediately failing if any are found. So basically, this tells us that failing fast and guard clauses are about checking invalid inputs. Guard clauses should be used under exceptional circumstances. So circumstances that we are not 100% sure about, things that could go wrong, right? Meaning that if an application gets to a point where under normal circumstances the specific scenario should not have happened or been possible, then an exception should be raised. Guard clauses are not appropriate for things such as user input validation, as invalid inputs are expected and thus not exceptional. So this is like a contrast between validation and exception. Exceptions are usually used when you are dealing with situations that you not expect to happen in the normal circumstances, under the normal circumstances of your project, but they might happen. For example, you might lose your connection to the database. So this is like an exception. It might happen, but you are not expecting it under normal circumstances. That is different from user input validation. So validation means that some data is entered by the user and you need to validate it. And more often than not, you expect the data that is entered by the user to be invalid. In this document file, as you can see, I have created two sections, two headings. This heading, we are going to cover this heading and all of its subheadings in this episode. And in the next one, we are going to go over the second heading and all of these subheadings. So we talked about what are guard clauses, right? Now let's move on. We've got an example. Let's consider a scenario where we are building an ASP.NET Core application and we need to process a new order. Our requirements include the order is represented by an order object. Okay, so we're going to have an entity called order. Every order must have a customer email address. Other information like order number and order date is typically provided, but we will focus on the essential customer email. Based on these requirements, the exceptional circumstance we need to guard against is attempting to create an order without a customer email address. So what we can do, I guess, is to go to our Visual Studio. We're going to create a new, let's say, project. So let's say we are going to create an ASP.NET Web API project, right? And here I am going to save it here, place solution and project in the same directory. I'm going to call it guard clauses in ASP.NET Core, and the solution file. And then I'm going to go to the next screen. I'm going to configure for HTTPS. I'm going to use .NET 8. I don't want enable open API support. I want controllers. I don't want minimal APIs. Do not use top level statements. I also want this one. Enlist in .NET Aspire orchestration. No. Enable container support. I don't think we're going to need that. So now let's create our project. So this is the project that we've got, right? And this is the HTTP file that helps us execute some requests to our API. What I am going to do is to create an order class. So I'm going to create an order class. This is going to be our entity. And in here, as you can see here on the right, we've got this order class and we've got 3 properties, right? Customer email, order number, order date, and then we're going to give our class this constructor. So let's do this quickly. We're going to say we have string customer email. We're going to have an order number of nullable string order number, and we're going to have a date time order date order date, and it's going to be nullable. Now we want a constructor, so we're gonna I think there is like no, I am using GitHub Copilot. I really don't remember the shortcut key for inline chat. Was it Alt U or something? Don't worry, we're gonna write it down ourselves. So I'm gonna say it says generate constructor using something, generate equals, add parameters to order. Yes, this is gonna work. Add parameters to order and add parameters to order. So right now we have this constructor which is setting the values for these properties. So back to our file, the requirement was that the order here, every order must have a customer email address. Other information like the order number and order date is typically provided, but we will focus on the essential customer email. Right now we've got this customer email, order number, order date or order data, Control RR. When you want to rename something, put your cursor at that identifier and then press Control RR in Visual Studio, and you will see this. And I think here we've got some AI as well, toggle rename suggestions, and then I'm going to rename this. So let's go back to our document. We want to prevent the creation of an order instance if the customer email parameter is not provided. Initial approaches might involve try catch blocks, if else statements, but these can be cumbersome as the number of properties to check increases. Of course, so here, for example, I can say, you know what, if, for example, if customer email, if string is null or empty customer email, then we're gonna throw an argument null exception. We can do this. This is one approach. Another approach would be to do what? To, for example, return something. Of course, we can't return something here from this, or we can. We can, I think, return null, right? No, we can't, because yes, this returns void. We can't return null. We can, for example, if it is a string or empty, one other approach would be to set it to some default value. Or else we can take this guy and put it here. So these are all the approaches that you might have tried in your projects, but these are not let's say these are not optimal solutions. We are going to do something else. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to put it here and back to our doc file. A more elegant solution is to use guard clauses, especially leveraging the Ardalis guard clauses NuGet library. After installing this library in your project, you can use a concise syntax. Concise means short and elegant to perform your checks. So let's go and install this in our project. Manage NuGet packages. I'm gonna go to browse, search for this guy. Our Dallas guard clauses. We've got custom, a simple package with guard clauses helper method. See docs for how to use this. Our Dallas smart enum or enum. I'm gonna install this one. So the latest version is 5 at the time of recording. Gonna install this guy, and right now in my dependencies I have this. So I have installed this. Let's rebuild the project as well. Okay, now let's move on to the doc file. So this is the class that we've got, like order class. Now in the constructor, what we can do now is to say, you know what, for customer email we want to guard against is null or empty. Customer email, name of customer email. So here in our Visual Studio we can say we want to guard, it comes from our Dallas guard.against.is null or empty, null or empty. Customer email, name of customer email. Now I want to take a look at this. It says this is an extension. It returns a string, right? iGuard clause null or empty. It is on a string input. It can have another parameter name that I think we are setting for the second parameter, and a string message is null by default. And func exception, exception creator null to overload, throws an argument null exception or a custom exception. We can also throw a custom exception if input is null. So if this input is null, throws an argument exception or a custom exception if input is an empty string. Input is the value, input returns input if the value is not an empty string. So this extension method is going to work on this input. If this input is not empty and is not null, it's going to return it, which is something that we want. So we are guarding against this input parameter. If it is not null, if it is not empty, we're going to return it. We're going to set it to this property. If it is null, we are going to throw an argument exception. And exceptions are what? Exceptions are argument null exception, argument exception, exception. And these are the exceptions. And of course, we can also set a message here, right? So we can go and do what? We can say, this is the error message. I'm going to say customer email address cannot be null or empty. If I press F12 here, this is the body of this exception, of this extension method. This iGuard clause, this is the extension method on this type, iGuard clause, and then it's gonna get this input, and then the name of the input, parameter name, and then the message. So this message is gonna be used here, right, for the exception that is gonna throw. So for argument exception, we are going to set this custom message if it is present, because it is nullable a string, and if it is not present, we are going to put this generic message as the message of our argument exception, because the first parameter of our argument exception is a message. So we have two choices, whether to use this message that we set in our example, because it is an optional parameter and by default it is null. It is saying if it is not null, use it. If it is null, use this string. Required input, and then the name of the parameter, which is in our case customer email, and then this was empty. So in our class, we are using a customer email, and we are using the custom message. So back to our doc. Now, if the customer email argument passed to the order constructor is null or empty, a system argument exception will be thrown early, indicating that the customer email cannot be null, which is the idea behind failing fast. So the moment the code determines that the customer email is null or empty, it's going to throw an error and then it's going to fail fast. And of course, there are other methods here as well. Guard against string too short. We are able to set a min length. For example, if we have a property here called, for example, let's say string customer name, I know that it doesn't make sense to have customer name inside of this order class, but this is just a demo because I want to null or empty. I want to write another code and say, let me first add this guy to our parameters, and then I'm gonna say I want this one to be here as well. I'm gonna say customer name, the name of the property is guard against dot too short, string too short. What? A string input is customer name, which is coming in the customer name, which is coming in the input parameter of this method. And then we can set a minimum length. It shouldn't be less than 5 characters. Parameter name is going to be name of customer name. And then again we have the message. The customer name cannot be shorter than 5 characters. So this is very clean. This is very elegant. This is very readable and understandable. So instead of having if-else clauses or throwing exceptions, which is a little bit difficult to read, I am going to make use of guard clauses with this library, because the code that I write when I am using this library is very elegant and very easy to understand. Back to our document. So we are here, right? Guard clauses beyond properties. So the utility of guard clauses and our Dallas guard clauses library extends beyond just object properties, because right now we are only using object properties. You can also use them to ensure that services have all the necessary dependencies. Consider a hypothetical order processing service in your ASP.NET Core depends on iOrder repository, iPayment gateway. So this is another scenario. Not only we can use guard clauses on object properties, like what we have done here, we can also make sure that if, for example, we have an application service like order processing service, all of its dependencies that we're going to take in the constructor of the application service has been set. So this is our class that we're going to implement. These are the 2 dependencies, and in the constructor of this class, this application service class, we're setting these 2 dependencies, and we're going to guard against them. We're going to make sure that they are not null. So let's implement this. In our Visual Studio, I'm going to create another class called, let's say, order processing service. Suppose that this is an application service and it has 2 dependencies on, let's say, application payment gateway and order repository, for example. And suppose I have registered them in my IOC container. I have implemented them, right? And I am going to register them. But we're not going to deal with service registration in this video. I'm going to come back to my order processing service, I'm going to create a constructor, and I am going to say I want an order repository, and I want iPayment gateway. Then I am going to put them into fields like this. So what does it say? Inconsistent accessibility. I'm going to make these public interfaces. Okay. Now, here again, what I can do before I assign these two guys to these private read-only fields, of course, I can do what? I can say if, for example, order repository is null, order repository is null, then throw an exception. Argument exception, and then tell me that, for example, say order repository can't be null. And I can do the same thing for payment gateway. Payment gateway cannot be null. And then if these two checks pass, then I'm gonna apply these. By the way, let me go to my order class and let me do something. I'm gonna go to this class. So this code, of course it works, but it isn't very understandable. It's not very clean. There is this concept of cyclomatic complexity in programming. So basically it is like, it has to do with the levels of indentation that you have in your code base. So here, instead of having this if conditionals in our constructor, we strive for clarity. We want to make our constructor as clean as possible, as concise as possible. So instead of doing this, we can say guard, coming from guard clauses, guard against null. So if this input, t input, order repository, if it is not null, then order repository, then assign it to this read-only field. But if it is null, then throw an exception. I'm going to comment out these two so that you can also work with them yourself. Let's take a look at this method. So this is our null method. It's an extension on guard clause, and these are the different input parameters, and we're going to say if input is null. This is basically the code that we previously wrote in our constructor, in order processing service constructor, but right now it has been baked into this extension method, so we can reuse it, right? So if input is null, then throw, it is creating this exception using exception creator invoke that we're not going to deal with right now. But if it is null or empty, if the string is null or empty of message, the custom message that you can set, then it's going to throw an exception. If the exception is not null, this exception, it's going to throw this one. If it is null, it's going to throw an argument null exception, and it's going to set the name of the parameter. Otherwise, if you have set a custom message like what we did, I think no, we didn't set a custom message. But anyway, if it isn't, if you have set a custom message, error message, it's going to create this argument null exception, and it's going to put that a string message in there with the parameter name. So this is nice. It is baked into this null, extension method. You don't need to make the code in your constructor complex or bloated by writing this piece of code. It has already been written as an extension method, and all you need to do is to make use of it. So that's a wrap for this video. This is the first episode of this playlist. We're gonna have another episode for the same playlist. I am going to clean up this solution, and I'm gonna what I am going to do is to push it to the repository I'm going to create on my GitHub profile for this solution. You can fetch this solution from there and start working with it. At the end of each video, I am going to make a commit to this repository so that you can track our progress in the history of that repository, clone it on your machine, and work with it if you want. Thank you so much for sticking till the very end. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if that's the case, please give it a thumbs up and stay tuned for the next video as well.